Well, hello and welcome to News Centre. I am Ashmit Kumar. With less than a month to go for the union budget, Indian industries are making a pitch to the Finance Ministry on the key demands that they want to be a part of the budget document. The electronics industry has called for simplification of what it calls as the most complex tariff regime. In a letter to the Finance Minister, accessed by CNBC TV 18, the Indian Cellular and Electronics Association, also called ICEA, called for rationalization of this tax on the import of components. The industry has also said that the current tariff structure has multiple rates, plus surcharge as well, adding that this regime is hurting competitiveness in the industry. The letter has recommended 0% duty on parts and inputs of sub-assemblies and components. It has further recommended 5% on parts of certain components and 15% duty on finished goods. Well, to discuss that further, we are now joined by Rajeev Khushu, the former chairperson and as well as the member of the board of directors at the India Electronics and Semiconductor Association, as well as Pankaj Mohindru. He's the chairman at the Indian Cellular and Electronics Association. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. Mr. Mohindru, let's go to you first. We were making a reference to a letter that you've written to the Finance Ministry. And I'll ask that in the context of the target that we're looking at. The Prime Minister has given the Indian industry a target of $500 billion by FY30. Basic calculation will tell you that that's a CAGR of over 27% that we're looking at. The numbers, however, tell us that we're not quite there yet. How do we make up this gap? What can the budget do to help us bridge that gap, to help the industry beat that 27% target of CAGR?
See, thank you for having me, Ashmit. The important thing is that this $500 billion can be achieved if we track exports of $180 to $200 billion. So the domestic industry will grow to about $250, $300 billion. And the exports have to grow at about 45% CAGR. Currently, the exports are about $30 billion. They have to go to $180 to $200 billion. Now that requires, this is something unprecedented. Although, as far as mobile phones are concerned, we have grown 2,200% in the last 8 years, from about $2.5 billion to $55 billion of output, and exports is at a historic high. This year, we will clock almost nearly 2 lakh crores of exports of mobile phones. So how will we do it? Now, one is that we have to fire on all cylinders, which is that the final products have to be assembled here, have to be exported out of here. We have to get more competitive by bringing in foundational industries and sub-assemblies and components here. We have to have wherever there is a maturity and now competitiveness is getting hurt because of tariffs, we have to reduce the tariffs. For example, what we are now, after the scale has been achieved in mobile phones of $50 billion plus, we are advocating that we have to reduce duties selectively on certain products where the duty is meaningless, where, it is neither creating manufacturing, nor is it, useful for any revenue collection. So those are the things. In certain areas, we have even asked for duty increase, like in case of washing machines and certain other products. We have asked for increase in this thing. We have to also see that the GVCs, which will form the bulk of this volume and value, they find India the most competitive place and the easiest place to do business. $500 billion is not, for any weak-hearted person. This has to be, all-out effort with
not
all
for the weak-hearted. Right, Mr. Mohindru. So need to fire on all cylinders, not for the weak-hearted, this target of $500 billion. I just want to ask one supplementary question. So, of the recommendations that you've given for the budget, one thing that was conspicuous by absence was a demand for the PLI for components. We've seen the conversation over the last 12 to 18 months, the industry expecting that PLI to come forth. Why is that missing? What is your pitch for the budget? Would you want to see this as well? And what is a good quantum of that outlay that you would want for this PLI component scheme?
I think that's quite settled now that the scheme is in its final architecture. And you see the final product output, which is now about $115 billion last year, which we are targeting $500 billion. The foundational industry work, which is semiconductors, etc., some good schemes have been rolled out about 2 years back. Now the middle, which is the PCB and others, important sub-assemblies and components, there is a complete understanding and realization that very solid stimulus for that is required to the tune of about 40,000 crores. I carefully articulate that this is not a subsidy or anything. This is an investment which the nation is making into a sector which the government trusts, because the PLI for large-scale electronic manufacturing has had scintillating results in terms of employment, in terms of exports, and in spite of the tremendous geopolitical challenges which the world is facing, we have delivered on that. So the nation and the government has confidence that this industry, which has delivered unprecedented results, 2,200% growth in mobile phone manufacturing and about 400% growth in electronic manufacturing, they can walk the talk. And that is why, we have, I think it's a situation where we understand, the industry
Right, Mr.
understands
Mohindra.
that it is only time now that this scheme is rolled out.
Right, Mr. Mohindra. So 40,000 crore rupee, that's your expectation, the industry's expectation from a PLI perspective for the components, for electronics components. Let's also get Mr. Rajeev Khushu in on this. Mr. Khushu, when we look at the semiconductor space, incentives is not something that the industry is short of. Offered by the center, offered by the state government as well. So clearly not short of incentives. So from that perspective, when you look at this latest upcoming budget, what is the industry's expectations? What can the government do to stimulate further growth?
I think we have really moved in the right direction in terms of the incentives. So we have seen many announcements, whether it is Tata's, Micron, making announcements for their fabs and ATMPs, I think is the right thing. But then this momentum has to be continuous, which means that we cannot just stop at $10 billion, which will get consumed in maybe a few quarters from now. So I think we will really need to top it up, which means that we are expecting that the next budget on the mission should at least be $15 to $20 billion while we continue that. But at the same time, what we also understand that what needs to be done is that India has to transform into the product nation. So what that means is that today we hardly have any products which are owned by India. Like, for example, most of the mobile phones and other products which are getting manufactured, which is the right thing to be done, that we are exporting and we're consuming. But then we are lacking in building the products locally. I think that's where this budget has to address it, which means that whether it is design-linked incentives, whether it is for the semiconductor products, which will ensure many semiconductor startups will come into the country, because all of us must understand that India as a country is very strong in semiconductor design. So today there's hardly any semiconductor company which does not have a design center in the country. So so if we push that, we will see many people coming out of their cushy jobs in their multinational companies. Because of these incentives, they will come out and start their own fabless companies. And the fabless companies, the government has kind of democratized it by giving incentives in terms of the tools, which was the biggest bottleneck that was addressed in the previous budget. So I am sure that will continue. So my 2 cents is that we should focus on our strength. design is our strength. So we need to basically push and probably have at least 10,000 crores for semiconductor and product which are designed in the country.
Sure.
So we should push that. While I'm talking about that, but the other thing which I want to emphasize is that what you are trying to push is that there are a lot of other parts of the semiconductors which are not basically, those jobs have not come. For example, there is a reliability of semiconductors. So it requires a lot of equipments which are capital intensive. I think those things need to be incentivized. Those things need to be basically incentivized for not only local companies, but also for global companies. Because as far as I know, most of the semiconductor companies do not
Mr.
do
Khushu.
these kind of work in the country. And this is really important. If we are able to address this through incentives, I think it will give a huge flip to the design and products design in the country.
Right, Mr. Khushu. One aspect that I want to just bring in from an issue that was raised by Mr. Mohindru as well, that as far as the electronics industry is concerned, the domestic demand has been a little flat over the last few years. Do you also see exports as perhaps the big driver going forward as far as realizing those growth aspirations? And if we are to do that, what is expected from the budget to give that impetus for the export push?
I think I agree with Pankaj. I think exports has to really see that part of the cylinder has to really fire very fast. I think Pankaj has done a great job in getting a lot of the mobile phones into the country, and we have seen a good progress. But I think we need to really see that the growth and the exports goes up. I think we need to incentivize that. Probably we need to give more incentives for the people who produce more and export more. I think that's one part which probably needs to be addressed. I'm sure Pankaj is working on that. We as IESA are also working very hard on that, and we are giving a lot of recommendations that we need to really push and incentivize that part of it. While we are on that target, I think that probably will be easier by moving some changes in the incentives part. But then what still we want India to be pushed. India needs to become a product nation. And for India to become a product nation, we need to really focus on our strengths.
We're completely out of time, Mr. Mohindru. I'll just come to you for a quick final word here. One big trigger that is around the corner is the Trump presidency. Given as how there are a lot of tariffs expected to be imposed on China, is that another opportunity for India to exploit the China plus one approach? A brief answer, Mr. Mohindru, almost out of time.
Ashmit, I have never seen a low-hanging fruit in my life. In 4 decades, there is no low-hanging fruit. We are, thinking like ostriches that things are going to fall in our lap. We have to strive for it, right? We have to strive hard for it. Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, these are the best of times and these are the worst of times. That is the situation. If we do it well, if we are deft, we can make a great success out of it. If we are daft, then it will be a colossal failure and it will work to our disadvantage. So we have our task cut out. It's just 17, 18 days away, and we have to step very, very hard on the accelerator as far as working with this administration is concerned.
So a word of caution there coming in from the industry. Mr. Mohindru, Mr. Khushu, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. But with that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. But